Welcome to The Explainer. This is where we take really complex source material and, well, we turn it into a story that's hopefully a lot more captivating.
So what if a poem held a mathematical secret? One that was hidden for decades? It sounds kind of crazy, right? But that's exactly what we're diving into today. This bizarre story about a mathematician who cracked a hidden code inside Russia's most famous poem.
All right, so let's set the scene. It's 1913, St. Petersburg, and we meet our main character, the Russian mathematician Andrey Markov. But here's the thing, he wasn't hunched over a bunch of equations. Nope, he was looking at poetry. And when I say he was looking at it, I mean he was really digging in. He wasn't just enjoying the verse. He meticulously counted the vowels and consonants in Alexander Pushkin's epic poem, Eugene Onegin. We're talking about the first 20,000 letters. He basically turned this incredible piece of literature into a long stream of raw data.
So you gotta ask, right? Why would a famous mathematician spend his time doing this? It's not like he was just bored and had nothing better to do. No, he was onto something big. He was testing a brand new, pretty groundbreaking theory about probability. And what he ended up finding was this incredible puzzle that, believe it or not, links math, language, and even secret codes.
Okay, so he's got all this data from the poem. What did it actually tell him? Well, Markov's analysis uncovered what you could call a random fingerprint for language. But, and this is a big but, it came with two clues that seemed to totally contradict each other. It was a real head-scratcher.
The first clue, on the surface, seemed pretty straightforward. It looked like language was just perfectly random. What he did was, he took the poem, chopped it up into 100-letter chunks, and plotted out how often vowels appeared. And as he did this, a really familiar pattern started to take shape. What he saw was this, a perfect bell curve, or what mathematicians call a normal distribution. Now, this is a huge deal, because this pattern usually points to one thing, pure, unadulterated randomness. It was like Pushkin hadn't written the poem at all, but instead, the letters were just chosen by, a cosmic roll of the dice. But there was a problem. That perfect randomness, it just didn't feel right. It wasn't the whole story. So Markov dug in a little deeper, and that's when he found this second clue, the one that completely turned everything on its head. And here is the big contradiction. He looked at the variance. That's just a fancy way of saying how much the different chunks of text varied from each other. And what he found was that the variance in Pushkin's poem was 5 times smaller than what you'd expect from pure chance. So the dice weren't just random, they were loaded. Something was constraining the language, pulling it into a tighter pattern. So how can that be? How can language be perfectly random and perfectly constrained at the exact same time? It's a total paradox, right? And that paradox is really the central mystery we're trying to solve here. It's following the laws of chance, but it's also being tightly controlled. So what in the world was this invisible force at play? All right, to solve this puzzle, we actually need to leave Russia for a second and head over to Geneva. Because, believe it or not, the key to this mathematical problem comes from a linguist, a guy named Ferdinand de Saussure. Now, the absolutely wild part is this. Saussure was working at the very same time as Markov, but they had no idea the other existed. And yet, Saussure had come up with the perfect explanation for both of Markov's contradictory clues. He theorized that, yeah, language evolves randomly. That's just what happens when millions of people make tiny, unconscious changes over time. That explains the bell curve. But, he said, those changes are also limited by the physical mechanics of our own mouths. Think about it. Saussure's idea was that language isn't just pure information. It's shaped by the physical thing that makes it, our mouths. There are certain combinations of letters that are super easy to say and others that are difficult or even impossible. This creates a kind of hidden structure. So even though language wants to be random, it's always held back by what we can physically pronounce. This constraint, what he called the traces of the mouth, that was the invisible force. That's what was loading the dice. Okay, so this is a huge breakthrough. Markov finally has a theory that makes sense, thanks to a linguist he's never met. But he's a mathematician, right? A compelling idea isn't enough. He needed to prove it with numbers. So he thought, okay, if these traces of the mouth are real, what would happen if I just destroyed them? If the physical limits of speech are what's causing that low variance, he needed a way to remove those limits. So he turned to a technique from cryptography to deliberately scramble the poem's letters and just shatter all their natural connections.
And his method was actually pretty simple, but totally ingenious. He just wrote the poem out in a big grid. But instead of reading it the normal way, left to right, he read it down the columns, vertically. By doing this, he created these bizarre sequences of letters that a human mouth would never, ever produce on its own. And the result was, well, you get these nonsensical monsters of words like mrnchtame, just total gibberish that's completely free from the normal rules of speech. He had done it. He had effectively erased the traces of the mouth from his data. So what happened when he ran the numbers on this scrambled mess? Well, check this out. The low variance just vanished. It was gone. The new data was a perfect match for a purely random distribution. He had proved it. Saussure was right. The physical act of speaking was the secret rule, the hidden force shaping the poem's statistical fingerprint. Okay, that seems like a pretty great place to end the story, right? A mystery solved. But hold on, because this is where things take one final, absolutely mind-bending twist. It turns out that Markov's brilliant method for scrambling the text wasn't actually his idea. Get this, in a coincidence that is just staggering, the poet himself, Alexander Pushkin, had used the exact same technique. Yeah. Decades before Markov ever looked at the poem, Pushkin had written a chapter that was politically explosive. It heavily criticized the Tsar. It was so dangerous he actually burned the original manuscript. But before he did, he rewrote it in code using that exact same grid-based cipher. And that secret chapter? It was only deciphered in 1910, just 3 years before Markov gave his lecture. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. It's an absolutely incredible historical coincidence. The mathematician, trying to find the hidden rules of language, used the exact same tool that the poet used to hide his words from the world. One used the cipher to reveal, the other used it to conceal. So what started as, a simple, kind of weird project, counting vowels and consonants, ended up revealing this deep, invisible structure that governs everything we say and write. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other secrets are hidden in the math of our own words? What mathematical fingerprints are we all leaving behind every single time we speak?